Some oddities kill you, some change you, but some let you survive while destroying the person you used to be, and everyone who loved you has to watch you become a stranger. Before we get into this one, guys, if you're new here, welcome to Medical Oddities. We tell true stories about the strange, the unexplained, and the downright bizarre corners of medical history. If that sounds like your kind of thing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, turn on all notifications, just so you don't miss the next one. Because trust me, it only gets weirder from here. This one brings us to Cavendish, Vermont, September 13th, 1848. Phineas Gage is a 25-year-old. He's also a railroad construction foreman. Good job, respected position. He's in charge of the whole crew, blasting rock to clear the way for the Rutland and Burlington Railroad. By all accounts, Phineas is a good guy. Responsible, hardworking, his boss describes him as one of the most efficient and capable foremen in their employ. His friends say nothing but polite things about him. They say he's even-tempered, reliable, the kind of guy that you'd want leading your crew. On this particular day, Phineas is prepared to blast. And here's how that works. First, you go ahead and you're going to drill a hole in the rock. Pour in this blasting powder, add your own fuse, and then you use a tamping iron, a long, heavy metal rod that you pack sand on top of the powder in to direct the explosion downwards into the rock. Phineas has done this hundreds of times, maybe thousands at this point. If there's an expert, it's him. But on this day, something goes wrong. He pours in the powder, starts tamping it down with his iron rod, normal thing. And either he forgets to add the sand first, or he gets distracted, or the powder ignites from some other friction. We're not quite exactly sure what happened, but what we do know is this. The powder, it explodes. And the tamping iron, 3 feet 7 inches long, 1¼ inches in diameter, weighing just over 13¼ pounds, shoots upwards like a missile. It would enter Phineas's face just below his left cheekbone. It passes through his skull out the back. It lands about 80 feet away, covered in blood and brain matter. According to witnesses, Phineas was just standing there preparing the blast. There was an explosion, the iron rod shot up through his head and flew through the air. Phineas was thrown backwards. He hits the ground hard, and then he just sits up. Full Undertaker. The crew rushes over expecting to find a corpse, but instead, Phineas is completely conscious. He's talking and he's asking what happened to him. Now guys, there is a hole in his face, a hole in the top of his skull, and there's blood everywhere. Brain tissue is visible. But he's alive and talking like nothing happened. One of the workers runs to get a doctor. The nearest physician is Dr. Edward Williams. He's about 3/4 of a mile away from where they were. And by the time Dr. Williams arrives, so roughly 30 minutes later, Phineas has walked to the ox cart with help, but he's sitting upright, still conscious, still talking, and just moving around like there's not a hole in the side of his head. Dr. Williams later wrote about what he saw, and in his journal is stated, "I first noticed the wound upon the head before I alighted from the carriage. The top of the head appeared somewhat like an inverted funnel. Mr. Gage, during the time I was examining his wound, was relating to the matter in which he was just injured to the bystanders. He was sitting in a chair upon the piazza of the hotel, conversing rationally, and in a few moments after my arrival, he got up and vomited. The effort of vomiting pressed out about half a teacupful of brain, which then fell upon the floor." So we're going to read that again. Half a teacupful of brain matter fell on the floor while Phineas was conscious and still talking. Dr. Williams would clean up the wound as best as he could. He can literally see into Phineas's skull, can see his brain pulsating. There are bone fragments embedded in the tissue. The damage is catastrophic. He expects that Phineas is going to die within hours, maybe a day, if he's lucky. Well, Phineas does not die. For the first few days, things are quite touch and go. Phineas would develop a massive infection. His face would swell up and this pus would start draining from the wound, just over the course. He's delirious. He has this fever. Dr. John Martin Hollow is another physician who would start taking over Phineas's care. He started documenting everything because no one's ever seen anything like this, and he certainly hasn't. The infection is so bad at one point, Phineas loses sight in his left eye. Completely. The eye itself is destroyed by the trauma and the infection. But slowly, impossibly, Phineas starts to improve. The fever breaks, the infection clears, and the wounds start to heal. By late October, just 6 weeks after the accident, Phineas is up and walking around. He's weak, but functional. By November, though, he's well enough to go home. Dr. Harlow is amazed. He writes in his journal that the patient was able to walk and appeared in good health with no apparent impairments of his mental faculties. Phineas Gage had just survived a 3.5-foot iron rod being blasted through his brain, quite literally. If anything, this is a medical miracle. Except, of course, something's wrong. Phineas's family was the first to notice it. He's different. Not physically, well, aside from the missing eye and the scars across his face, but primarily it's personality-wise. The old Phineas was polite, considerate, patient, and responsible. The new Phineas is not. He's rude, impatient, impulsive. He curses constantly, something he never did before. He makes inappropriate comments to all the women. He's crude and vulgar in the ways that just shock everyone that knew him. His filter, that thing's gone. There's no social awareness. He says exactly what he's thinking all the time, no matter how offensive or hurtful it is. His friends would try to talk to him about it and try to get him to kind of revert, but he would get angry, defensive, and even violent, throwing punches at some of them just mid-conversation. The railroad company would try to give him his job back. Within weeks, they fire him because they can no longer trust him, and he can't be relied on to even show up. He's erratic and unpredictable. Dr. Harlow would document these changes. In his journal, it would state, the equilibrium between his intellectual faculties and animal propensities seemed to have been destroyed. He is fitful, irrelevant, indulging at times in the grossest profanity, which was not previously his custom. He has been patient, of restraint, of advice, and always desires conflict. He has radically changed, so decidedly so that his friends and acquaintances say he is no longer Gage. No longer Gage. Think about that. The people who knew him best, his friends, his family, and his co-workers, they looked at him and said, that's not Phineas. That's somebody else. The body survived, but the person they knew, he is long gone. Blasted away, so to speak. So then what does Phineas do? He can't hold a job down, he can't maintain relationships, and he can't function in normal human society, especially not the way he used to. So he starts taking odd jobs, works at stables, does manual labor, drifts from town to town. For a while, he joins P.T. Parnham's circus. That P.T. Parnham. Phineas becomes a sideshow attraction, the man who survived the tapping iron. He travels with the iron rod that went through his skull, showing it to audiences for money. Imagine being so changed, so unable to fit into your old life, that you end up circus cosplaying the instrument of your destruction. He eventually ends up in Chile, working as a stagecoach driver, and apparently he's quite good at it. The repetitive nature of the job seems to suit him better. He can follow the routes, manage the horses, and he's not actually required to be social or to improve his social skills or even control his impulses. And he does that for several years, and then things start to get a little interesting. Some accounts suggest he started to improve, started to regain some of his old personalities, become more reliable, more patient, more like the old Phineas. So we wonder if maybe his brain was healing, maybe he was adapting, maybe the neural pathways were rerouting themselves kind of around the damage. We'll never know for sure because in 1860, Phineas starts having seizures. And the seizures get worse, more frequent, more severe. Phineas moves to San Francisco to live with his mother and sister. They take care of him and unfortunately have to watch him deteriorate. On May 21st, 1860, a little over 12 years after the accident, Phineas has a series of these violent catastrophic seizures, and he would die that night. He's 36 years old. His family buries him in San Francisco, and that would be the end of the story, except Dr. Harlow, he never forgets about Phineas. He'd lost touch with him over the years, but he'd always wondered what really happened to him, whether the damage had been permanent, whether Phineas had ever recovered. So in 1866, Dr. Harlow tracked down Phineas's family, and he asked permission to exhume the body. Specifically, he wanted to study the skull. The family, trusting the doctor, agreed. Dr. Harlow would dig up Phineas's grave, remove his skull, and he studied it extensively. He also retrieved the original tamping iron, which had been buried with Phineas. The skull and the iron rod are still on display today at the Warren Anatomical Museum at Harvard Medical School. You can go see them, touch them, and look at the hole where the iron passed through. So we have physical evidence of one of the most important cases in the history of neuroscience. So now, what actually happened to Phineas's brain? The tamping iron, it entered below his left cheek, passed behind his left eye, and exited through the top of his skull, slightly to the left center. That way. Based on the trajectory and the damage to the skull, neuroscientists have reconstructed the path of the iron rod. It destroyed most of his left frontal lobe, specifically the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Now, in 1848, nobody knew what the frontal lobe actually did. The dominant theory, though, was that the brain was basically uniform, so damage anywhere would cause the same general problems. We know now that that's not the case, and we know that because Phineas Gage proved that wrong. The frontal lobe, particularly the prefrontal cortex, is responsible for executive function, decision making, impulse control, social behaviors, emotional regulation, planning for the future, general understanding of any consequences. Basically, all the things that make you a functional adult in modern society. So it separates the man from the beast. Phineas lost that. The iron rod destroyed the part of his brain that controlled who he was as a person. His memory, though, was fully intact. His intelligence was intact, his motor skills were intact. He could walk, talk, think, and reason. But his personality, his fundamental self, was altered. This was the first documented case proving that specific brain regions control specific aspects of personality and behavior. Before Phineas Gage, we didn't understand that you could damage part of the brain and change someone's fundamental nature, while still leaving everything else intact. Phineas Gage became the foundation of modern neuroscience. His case is taught in every neurology and psychology program in the world right now. But here's a part they don't always talk about in the textbooks. Phineas Gage wasn't a case study. He was a person. He had a life before the accident. He had friends, a career, and a future. After the accident, he had none of that. His friends didn't abandon him out of cruelty. They abandoned him because he wasn't the person they knew. They didn't understand why he was hostile, unpredictable, and having these violent outbursts. His family did try to help, but he pushed them away, got angry when they tried to guide him or correct his behavior because he also didn't know what was going on. He couldn't hold a job not because he was physically incapable, but because he'd lost the ability to plan things, to control his impulses, and to interact appropriately with other people. Imagine waking up one day and everything you knew about social interaction, about being patient, about thinking before you speak, all of that your family, friends, parents taught you is gone. But you don't understand why people are upset with you when you do things. You don't understand why you can't keep a job and what you did wrong. You just know that life used to make sense and was easy and you had a good time. And now it doesn't, and everyone looks at you like you're a stranger. No one wants to be around you. You don't know why, but to them, you are a stranger. This is the philosophical nightmare that Phineas Gage forces us to confront. I know we've talked about it on other videos, but who are you? Are you your memories? Phineas kept his memories, though. He knew who he was, where he came from, his family, and what happened to him. So are you your intelligence? Well, Phineas kept that too. He could reason, he could solve problems, and still learn new skills. Okay, so are you your body? Well, Phineas kept his body. Same face, well, mostly. Same hands, same voice, same strength. Boom. But everyone who knew him said he was no longer Phineas anymore. So, what makes you you? Is it your personality, your temperament, your ability to control your impulses, your ability to interact with others? If so, then when Phineas lost his frontal lobe, did the person that was Phineas die? Was the man who survived the accident a different person inhabiting Phineas Gage's body? Because it's been documented that his friends thought so. They specifically said that he was no longer him. Now, modern neuroscience suggests that they were right. The Phineas Gage who woke up after the accident was, in a very real sense, a different person than the one who went to work that morning. He did have the same brain, the same memories, but he was now a different self. Phineas Gage at this point has now been dead for a little over 160 years, but his case is still studied, still debated, and still referenced in every discussion about consciousness, personality, and what makes us humans. There have been other cases since then, of course there have. People who've suffered frontal lobe damage and experienced similar personality changes. Specifically soldiers with traumatic brain injuries, even stroke victims, tumor patients, all of them showing these same exact patterns. Once you lose that frontal lobe, you lose your impulse control, your social awareness, and the thing that quite certainly makes you you. But poor Phineas, he was the first that we know of, the one who proved it was possible to survive with catastrophic brain damage and become someone else. Medical science has learned an incredible amount from his case specifically. We understand the brain better because of what happened to him. I keep thinking about Phineas himself, not the case study, but the person, because he didn't know that he'd changed. He didn't know if he had lost a person that he used to be, and he had no one to mourn. Nobody knew what happened. The damage to the frontal lobe took away his ability to reflect on himself, to understand what he had lost. What he felt, obviously, we'll never know. All we have is Dr. Harlow's notes, the skull, the tamping rod, and the knowledge that Phineas Gage survived the unsurvivable. But he lost himself in the process. There is one more detail about Phineas' case that doesn't get talked about too much. After the accident, Phineas apparently avoided mirrors. He hated looking at himself. His family noted this, and Dr. Harlow had mentioned it a couple times in his writing, that Phineas would turn away from all reflective surfaces. He would cover mirrors around his house or wherever he was staying when he could. So maybe it was because of the scars and the missing eye, the visible damage to his face? Or maybe it was because when he looked in the mirror, he didn't see himself either. Maybe he remembered somewhere deep in his damaged brain that he used to be someone else, someone better, someone calmer, someone he could no longer recognize. Maybe for him, that was the worst part of all. Not the pain of the injury, not the physical recovery, but looking in the mirror every day and not knowing who you're even looking at anymore. Phineas Gage survived a tamping rod inside of his brain, but the person he used to be, that person died on September 13th, 1848. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Sweet dreams. So guys, thanks for sticking around. I just want to kind of throw in real quick that we will be uploading 2 to 4 videos a week moving forward. I know some of these videos are heavy, and these stories, they try to hit different, especially when you try to think about the person and not just the medical case. But a quick reminder, everything we cover on the channel is based on real cases and real medical phenomena. But I treat these as stories, so I will tell them as stories, because sometimes that means we have to recreate dialogue, imagine perspectives, or change names and details to protect the family's privacy and to make the narrative flow. The core facts, though, I will always keep those real. The weird, the inexplicable details, also real, but we're not writing medical journals here. We're sitting around a campfire. And sometimes campfire stories just need a little room to breathe. If you found this story as thought-provoking as I did, do me a favor, guys, like the video. It helps more people find these stories. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got plenty more medical oddities to explore. And guys, some of these make losing your personality look almost merciful. Until next time, stay curious and be grateful that you're still yourself.